Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is John. I got options, and today we are talking about Cerebras and NVIDIA. So finally, we have a potential competitor to NVIDIA and their GPUs. So tomorrow, or if you're watching this video, then it's already happened, but Cerebras is IPOing. And they are coming out at a crazy valuation. They are rumored to IPO between $40 and $50 billion valuation. So in this video, we're going to explain a little bit about what Cerebras does and why there is such a hype for this IPO, why there's such a hype for this company, and is this really going to be a NVIDIA competitor? That's the question we got to ask ourselves. And we got to ask ourselves, is Cerebras really a buy at a $40-50 billion valuation when last year they've only generated $500 million in revenue? So let's get into it. I prepared a little slideshow here to explain different aspects of Cerebras and NVIDIA. So right now, NVIDIA is the dominator when it comes to AI with their GPUs. And they're slowly getting into the inference side of the business because that seems to be like it's going to be the long-term way that these chip companies, these AI companies are going to make their money. It's from the inference. So the difference between training and inference is, think of it like the first time you learned how to ride a bicycle, you were using training. You were training your brain. You were using a lot of compute and energy and power to train yourself to ride the bicycle. But now when you just hop on the bicycle, you're using much less brain power, and it's a different part of your brain that's operating, and that's the inference, when you just hop on a bicycle and you ride it like you've ridden it a million times before. So inference costs is going to be an ongoing thing. You're always riding your bicycle, but you only need to learn how to ride your bicycle one time. So that's where Cerebras comes in. They are going to be tackling the inference side of the AI market. So this IPO, it's coming out at $40 to $50 billion. Now, today, what we're going to break down is what Cerebras actually does and how they're different from NVIDIA, why investors are so excited, and why this could become one of the most important AI infrastructure companies of the next decade. Because this isn't just another chip startup. Cerebras is trying to build AI computers in a completely different way than chips are being built today. So before we get into that, we need to talk about how NVIDIA works and what NVIDIA does. So the way NVIDIA works is they have many chips working in parallel, and they're using these chips to power models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok. Basically, all of them are running on NVIDIA's GPUs. And NVIDIA's strategy has been pretty simple, which is instead of one massive processor, they connect together thousands of smaller GPUs onto a giant AI cluster. And so you can imagine a supercomputer made out of Lego bricks, and each GPU does a piece of the work. Then all the GPUs have to communicate together over ultra-fast networking systems like NVLink, InfiniBand, and custom network fabrics. So this works incredibly well. As AI models are getting larger and context windows are getting bigger and reasoning models become more and more complex, moving that data between all these GPUs becomes a massive bottleneck. You're constantly transferring information chip to chip, rack to rack, server to server, and that creates a lot of latency, power consumption, heat, networking complexity, and a lot of inefficiencies. So that's where Cerebras is coming in, because Cerebras looked at this problem and they said, you know what? What if instead of using thousands of smaller chips, what if we made just one giant chip? And I mean literally giant. This chip is like the size of a dinner plate. It's massive. But Cerebras is doing literally the opposite. They're keeping almost the entire wafer as one processor. So their flagship product is called the Wafer Scale Engine. And this thing it's pretty insane. So it's 4 trillion transistors, hundreds of thousands of AI cores, and it's physically about the size of an entire silicon wafer, which, like I said, it's like the size of a dinner plate. So compared to a normal NVIDIA GPU, it dwarfs it in size. So instead of thousands of those tiny little chips, you're having one giant chip. And Cerebras tries to keep everything on one massive unified processor. So there's less communication, there's less bottlenecks, there's less inefficiencies, there's less latency. So that's the big idea that Cerebras had. And this is how they're attacking and differentiating themselves in the market. So now we need to talk about inference. And I know we talked a little bit about it, but pretty much inference is the next wave of where the money is going for AI, because we've done a lot of training. We have a lot of training done. There's going to be much more training in the future, no doubt. But inference, with all these AI agents especially, you're going to have massive loads of inference compute that are going to be needed. So a company like Cerebras could potentially have a crazy TAM, and NVIDIA is going to be part of it too. So inference is when the AI model is actually running after it's trained. This is the part consumers use. When you ask ChatGPT a question or generate an image or use an AI coding assistant, that's all inference. And many people believe inference could eventually become a much larger market than training. Because once AI gets embedded into search, enterprise software, robotics, autonomous systems, operating systems, video generation, and agents, the amount of inference compute required could absolutely explode. And Cerebras is heavily targeting this market. They claim advantages in lower latency, faster token generation, larger context windows, and potentially better power efficiency. That's why you constantly hear them talking about ultra-fast inference, real-time reasoning, massive context AI. Now, does this mean Cerebras is going to dethrone NVIDIA? Well, probably not, because NVIDIA's real advantage is not just the hardware, it's the actual ecosystem. Now, this is the bull case for Cerebras. It's all about inference. Inference is when the AI model is actually running after the model has been trained. This is the part that consumers use. This is when you ask ChatGPT a question. This is when you're using your Claude bot. This is when you're generating an image. This is when you're using an AI coding assistant. That's all inference. Because once AI gets embedded into everything we're doing, from robotics to enterprise software to autonomous systems to operating systems and agents, that is a lot of inference that is going to be needed. And the amount of inference compute required is going to explode. And Cerebras is heavily targeting this market. So Cerebras claims advantages in lower latency, faster token generation, larger context windows, and potentially better power efficiency. So now let's get into the numbers of Cerebras. Cerebras last year did $500 million in revenue, and they have a massive backlog. I believe their backlog is over $24 billion. So there's a lot of demand from these AI hyperscalers for this new way of building these chips for inference. And some of these projections are projecting Cerebras to do over $2 billion in revenue by 2027 and possibly $4 to $7 billion by 2028. So the company has also discussed massive backlog, and they have massive contracted demand tied to AI infrastructure deployments. So investors are not valuing Cerebras based on today's numbers, but they're valuing it on what they could be doing in just a few years. Because if they're doing $4 billion in 2028, well, then you're paying 10 times revenue today. And if they're continuing to double that number or close to double that number year over year for a couple years, then you can see very quickly how paying $40 billion today for Cerebras makes a lot of sense. Now, I wish the market wasn't so brilliant, and I wish they weren't so bullish, and I wish they wouldn't value this company as high as they are valuing it today, because it would be amazing to pick this stock up at $20 billion and maybe we'll get that opportunity, but my guess is probably not, because looking at what this company does and looking at their backlog and looking at how they project to grow their revenue this fast, this quickly, I believe that this IPO is going to get bought up. I wouldn't be surprised if it shoots up to 60, 70, 80 billion dollars in market cap for a little bit, and then hopefully trickles back down to this 40 billion. And in some world, maybe it drops down to under 40 billion, maybe it gets into the 30, 20 billion area, because then you're looking at a real good opportunity to be grabbing Cerebras. Now, 40 billion, if you're a long-term investor, probably a good pickup. Now, if it goes down to 20 billion, now we're talking about potentials for looking at options, looking at leaps, 2-year out leaps for the company to double and triple in size. That's when things could get very interesting for the option side of things. That's what I got for you guys. I just wanted to do this quick video going over Cerebras, going over NVIDIA, explaining the differences, and hopefully we can enter in on this company tomorrow if it's around this 40-50 billion. If it shoots up crazy, I'm not touching it. But you do your own thing. This is not financial advice. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And make sure you stay tuned for more. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.